The New York State Supreme Court pulsed with tension on Friday, June 6, 2025. This day wasn't just a turning point for Sean "Diddy" Combs. It was a devastating reckoning for a mother's broken heart. All eyes were drawn to Janice Combs in the front row. Silent, dignified, and visibly burdened, she bore the weight of a collapsing legacy. Her face, lined with worry and fierce maternal love, told the story of a woman who had watched her son ascend to unimaginable heights and now teeter on the edge of ruin. That abyss he now faced, she too was falling into. Across the courtroom, Diddy sat motionless. His trademark swagger had vanished, replaced by a heavy stillness that revealed the storm within. Janice stared at him, her heart clenching, searching desperately for even the faintest flicker of hope in his eyes. Then Judge Eris Thorne entered. A suffocating hush fell over the courtroom. Janice's breath caught in her chest as the judge's dispassionate voice cut through the silence, announcing the verdict. He paused, a moment that stretched into eternity. Janice swayed slightly. Her vision blurred. Hope drained from her body like blood from a wound. Then came the shattering blow. The court finds the defendant, Sean John Combs, guilty on all counts: racketeering, sex trafficking, and sexual assault. A collective gasp tore through the room. Before anyone could react further, a raw, guttural cry erupted, unmistakably maternal and agonizing. The room turned in unison toward Janice Combs. Her eyes, wide and hollow, stared ahead, absorbing the weight of the words. Her body stiffened, then crumpled to the polished courtroom floor. A low whimper escaped her lips. "Medic!" a court officer yelled, breaking the stunned silence. Pandemonium followed. Diddy lurched forward, his face a canvas of disbelief and torment. He strained against his legal team, eyes locked on his mother's collapsed figure. The guilty verdict was brutal. But this was worse. This was annihilating. Seeing Janice, his lifelong supporter, his bedrock, lifeless on the cold tile, broke him in a way no court ever could. The judgment had been handed down, its finality irreversible. But the true collapse of Sean Combs had only just begun, and Janice Combs was the most tragic witness to its beginning. To understand the full horror of this moment, one must trace the winding path that led here, a path paved with glittering victories, blinding success, and haunting secrets. Janice had watched her son's rise from the very beginning. From humble roots, Diddy, once known as Puff Daddy, later P. Diddy, climbed to dominate the music world. His drive, ambition, and magnetism seemed unstoppable. In the early 2000s, he sat at the peak of American culture, his influence unmatched, his fame limitless. The opulent white parties at his Star Island and Hamptons mansions became mythic. To the world, they were celebrations of success. To Janice, they were affirmations of the dream her son had achieved. She never truly knew what went on behind closed doors, but she believed in the image he projected, an image of brilliance, vision, and earned triumph. She ignored the whispers. She silenced her doubts. Her pride was blinding. One such night stands out, August 15, 2002. A glittering, star-studded gathering at his Star Island estate. Among the powerful and elite was a young actress named Serafina Vance. Stunning, radiant, and new to fame, she glowed with promise. But she was also vulnerable, too trusting in a world built on illusion. Diddy noticed her instantly. Ever the calculating host, he moved toward her with practiced charm. And thus began a descent few could have foreseen, except perhaps the woman who had always watched him the closest, and yet never saw the truth. He set his sights on Serafina, not merely as a beautiful woman, but as a valuable asset, fresh prey. To Diddy, she wasn't a guest. She was an opportunity. Approaching her by the pool, his voice dropped to a soft, seductive murmur. He promised. access to a world of limitless possibility, a dream wrapped in glamour and power. It was an irresistible invitation. He handed her a specially mixed cocktail, vibrant with exotic fruits and alluring color. But beneath the sweetness lurked a dangerous secret. It was laced with a subtle intoxicant, a chemical trap designed to erode resistance. Later that night, as the party dwindled and the music softened, Diddy extended an invitation to Serafina and a few other young, impressionable guests. They followed him to a secluded wing of the mansion, far from prying eyes and the fading lights of celebration. The mood shifted, no longer festive, now tinged with unease. The air grew heavy, the shadows deepened. What began as revelry descended into something darker, something terrifying. Equally tragic and haunting was the story of Elias Echo Hayes, a prodigious young music producer who had idolized Diddy. He saw him as a god of sound, a living legend. When he arrived at Diddy's sprawling New York studio on July 23, 2007, Echo believed he was stepping into the next chapter of his future, a place where dreams were made. But what waited him was not inspiration, but a kingdom built on exploitation. Janice Combs, meanwhile, was often present in the background. A quiet figure on the edges of her son's empire, she saw more than she admitted. Perhaps she noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere, the whispered conversations, the wary expressions of young newcomers. Perhaps she sensed the unease but brushed it off. It was just part of the business, she told herself. Diddy began to pressure Echo into acts that blurred all moral lines. He offered a special drink, prepared just for him, another chemical sedative masked by luxury. Its effects blurred Echo's perception, stripped away his sense of control, and plunged him into a cycle of dependency. Over the weeks that followed, he became trapped in a psychological prison, used, broken, and silent. Janice's maternal instincts, long dulled by habit and denial, may have flickered in those moments. She may have caught fragments of the truth in hushed tones or haunted eyes. There were signs, indistinct but present. Still, she held fast to the image she'd clung to for years. Her son, the genius, the mogul, the icon. But the dam was cracking. For years, Janice had lived with persistent rumors. She heard the whispers, the shadows that trailed behind her son's name, but she always dismissed them. He was demanding, yes. Complex, certainly, but not that. Never that. Then came November 2023, a turning point so sharp it cut through the fog. The first major civil lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. Cassandra Cassie Ventura, a talented singer and former romantic partner of Diddy, stepped into the light. On November 16, 2023, she filed a lawsuit that sent shockwaves through the industry and shattered Janice's carefully constructed reality. The complaint detailed harrowing allegations, sexual assault, physical violence, and sex trafficking. As the headline screamed, "Cassie sues Diddy," Janice's mind reeled backward in time. She remembered the early 2000s, Cassie's soft smile, her subdued demeanor after loud arguments, the way she sometimes flinched at sudden movements. She remembered thinking something was off, but brushing it aside. That was just a mother's overthinking. Or so she told herself. Cassie's courage ignited a wildfire. Her voice broke the silence others had kept for too long, and her bravery gave strength to those still hidden in the shadows. One by one, others came forward until silence was no longer possible. The veil had been torn. Janice watched with mounting dread. She clung to the hope that it was all fabricated, a cruel attempt to bring down a powerful black man. She repeated this to herself over and over, but denial eroded under the rising tide of accusations. On February 27, 2024, another blow landed, a federal lawsuit filed by Rodney Lil Rod Jones, Diddy's former producer. His testimony was a bombshell, detailing widespread sexual misconduct, coercion, drug use, and orchestrated abuse. It sent a chill across the nation. Janice remembered him. Lil Rod had been a quiet, hard-working presence in the studio, always there, always grinding. She recalled the endless stream of people, the fog of marijuana, the eerie energy that hovered in the air. She had written it off as the music world's excess, but now she couldn't ignore the truth. The collapse escalated on March 25, 2024. In a spectacle broadcast live across the country, federal agents from Homeland Security investigations executed search warrants on Diddy's mansions in Los Angeles and Miami. Cameras captured the raid, the flashing lights, the armored vehicles. Janice sat frozen in front of her television, watching her son's empire, the empire she had once praised and protected, disintegrate in real time. Everything she had believed in was crumbling. The legacy, the image, the dream, it was all unraveling, and she was no longer just a mother defending her son. She was a mother staring into the abyss, forced to reckon with what had always been there, hidden behind the brilliance. Everything was collapsing before Janice Combs's eyes, her world, her beliefs, her very identity, losing all semblance of stability. The trial began on May 15, 2025. For Janice, it marked the start of an unendurable ordeal. Each morning, she walked into the courtroom, holding tightly to the fragments of hope she had left. But every witness, every piece of evidence, chipped away at that hope, until it was all but gone. The New York State Supreme Court had become a fortress, bristling with security and choked with media. The public's fascination was eclipsed only by its outrage. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Evelyn Reed, presented a case that was airtight and harrowing. Her opening statement unfolded with surgical precision, connecting years of Diddy's alleged crimes into a coherent and damning narrative that left no room for denial. For Janice, each word struck like a hammer. Exploitation, trap, silence. They echoed in her mind, stirring memories she had long repressed. Fleeting, uncomfortable moments, a young singer pale and shaking after a studio session, a hushed argument behind, a closed door she brushed off as stress, tension she dismissed as the cost of ambition. Now, those memories clawed back to the surface, unwilling to be ignored. On May 20th, Serafina Vance took the stand. The once bright young actress now carried the weight of survival in her voice. Trembling but resolute, she spoke of the infamous party in Miami, of charm used as manipulation, of a cocktail laced with violation, and a night that began with glamour and ended in trauma. It was about control, she said, her voice cracking, but unwavering. Janice felt those words settle deep inside her. Control had always been her son's currency. He demanded it in business, in family, in life. She once saw that as strength. Now it looked like something darker, something cold, and invasive, something cruel. A new image of her son began to form, and she struggled to stop it, to hold on to what she knew, or thought she knew. And then came June 6, 2025. The courtroom was silent, almost reverent, as Judge Eris Thorne entered at 9:45 a.m. Janice's heart pounded as the judge addressed the court. Diddy sat frozen across the room, no longer defiant, only hollow. The jury has reached a verdict on all counts. The stillness fractured. On the count of racketeering, guilty. A low gasp moved through the room. On the count of sex trafficking, guilty. Janice's breath hitched. On the count of sexual assault, guilty. The word hung in the air like a final nail. Diddy's mask shattered. His head dropped. Murmurs and gasps erupted from the gallery. Then a cry split through the noise. No, my son, no. All eyes turned to Janice Combs. Her face, twisted in horror, seemed barely human, raw, undone. She clutched her chest, her mouth opened in a silent scream. Her knees buckled, and then she dropped to the floor in a graceless, crumpled heap. The sound of her fall echoed in the stunned silence. "Mother!" Diddy's voice, guttural and broken, cut through the air as he surged forward. Two federal marshals were already moving. They caught him, held him, restrained him, but his eyes never left his mother. His lips trembled, repeating her name like a mantra as medical personnel rushed to Janice, quickly erecting a privacy screen. Judge Thorne banged his gavel for order. "Clear the courtroom. We will reconvene at 1 p.m. for sentencing." SSO. The room emptied. Diddy remained frozen, flanked by guards, staring at the white screen that now shielded the woman who had always believed in him. The woman who had raised him, defended him, stood by him when no one else would. The woman he had broken. His empire was gone. The illusions were stripped away. His name, once a symbol of success and power, was now a cautionary tale. The fall wasn't just about a man. It was about a culture that let him thrive, unchecked and untouchable. A culture that failed the women and men who now filled the witness lists and headlines. Janice Combs's collapse wasn't just a moment of grief. It was the physical manifestation of years of denial colliding with a terrible truth. It was the sound of everything she believed in disintegrating in a single breath.